Welcome everyone to our puzzle designing special meet today. It's part of our conscious designing project that officially starts from 2024. A small background about Phil. He's a lead IT infrastructure specialist working in technology services at the U of I, and he's responsible for designing, deploying, maintaining, and securing the computing infrastructure at his workplace. There are a lot of details there that I'm not going to get into. Apart from computing, Phil also is interested in woodworking, ceramics, painting, gardening, and he's into Master Gardener's program for this year, if I'm not mistaken. And he collects puzzles. He has a graduate degree in physics and mathematics. So it's great to have you today. Talk about your designs and in general about puzzles and how are they fun and benefiting. So over to you, Phil.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks very much for your wonderful introduction. Yes, it's been, I think, 4 years since I've had the exhibit at SPRO. I think, of course, that wouldn't have been possible without working with the excellent staff. But it was a lot of fun. There hasn't been anything like that on campus. And I am very pleased for them to say that this was the biggest summer opening of any exhibit that they've had there at the time. So there was great response from it. It was anytime I had a chance to think about puzzles, it gave me a chance to come up with new ideas. And in putting this exhibit and putting this short presentation together, and let me just share the screen here. If I can do that. I know my connection is a little bit low, so I'll let you look at the pictures here. And if there's any questions, if I don't come across clearly, just let me know. So puzzles are interesting. There are puzzles that can be traced all the way back to Archimedes, of all things. Archimedes is actually credited with creating the first puzzle, called the Loculus of Archimedes. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of that here. It's a little bit complicated, but I can show it to you at a later time if you want. I've made a couple of these, and it's a tremendous achievement. And there are puzzles that word problems, number problems. We even go back thousands of years. So, what's interesting about puzzles? Well, I was thinking about that. People are curious. We as humans are curious creatures. We want to know how things work. We want to figure things out. Okay, so I'm sort of taking that as a granted here. That's actually what talking about. Why are we so curious about things? Why can't we just take things as they are at face value? Why do we think about things? But if we take it for granted that we are, then puzzles certainly make a lot of sense. And there are lots of puzzles people spend time working on. People work Sudoku puzzles, crossword puzzles, cryptograms. There are just dozens and dozens and dozens of different puzzles that appear in newspapers that people see every day. A lot of people view these things as little, a nice way to spend 5 or 10 minutes, a little, mind twister kind of thing to figure out. But there are some puzzles which I think are so outstanding that you can think of them as truly creative puzzles. There are puzzles that have an unexpected aspect to them. And there are puzzles that are actually quite meditative, that you're not really stressed out when you're looking at them. It actually puts you in a very calm state of mind. And so I collected a few of those for this presentation here. And so we got to the first group here. I'm thinking creative puzzles. You don't have to solve them. It actually is a way of enhancing your own creativity. You may not have a need for doing exactly what you're doing in the puzzle, but I think this really grows neurons. Okay. And three that are excellent, or two that are actually excellent examples of this are Tangram and Soma Cube. And I'm going to talk. I don't know whether people have seen these or not. The Tangram. Tangram actually originated about the beginning of the 1800s in China. And yes, it was very popular there, but way back then, there was already a beginning trade with the United States through ships going across the oceans, and they brought this puzzle back, and people went absolutely nuts about it. From the
Oh,
United States and across the U.S. from coast to coast, and from there it went to Europe, and it was explosive. This was the first you consider worldwide puzzle craze. And there are books going back to the 1800s of diagrams that you can make with these. And one of the very first um, handgram sets that made it to the US is actually housed in a Philadelphia museum. And it's carved out of ivory. And it's gorgeous. And
oh,
it's always these, it's a square that's been cut along the diagonal, and then again to make two large triangles. And you can see how it's cut again halfway across the remaining piece to make a smaller triangle. And then you've got two little triangles, a square, and then kind of a rhombus almost, parallelogram shape here. So it's 7 pieces. And what's so cool about this puzzle is that you can make it out of a piece of paper or a piece of cardboard with a knife or a pair of scissors in no time at all. I've made these things out of metal, out of glass, wood, different kinds of woods, and there are thousands and thousands, probably well over 10,000 different shapes that I've got books, and a half an inch thick of nothing but these puzzles.
wow.
You can arrange these to make many interesting shapes. It's just phenomenal. They don't look like anything, but you can make them look like this is supposed to be sort of like a bat. Here's looks like a stork, right? A bird on one
Lovely.
foot. Here's one that looks like a person running. It's amazing.
That's
Here's one that
lovely.
looks like a cat, and then yeah, it's very nice. And then here's one that looks like a cat that's got its tail curled up. So you can make animals, cats, dogs, other creatures. You can make buildings. You can make boats. You can make bridges, and then you can just have just different types of geometric abstract shapes. And what's cool about this is that you can try to reproduce one of the shapes that you see. But one thing I do is just take these shapes and you just put them on your desk and just start to put them together in different ways. And sort of like when you're looking at a cloud up in the sky and you're asking yourself, what does this look like? You put these pieces together and then you kind of sit back and you say, what does this look like? And at first it might not look like anything, but when you begin to think about it, oh, yeah, I can see that. And then you can turn the thing around. If you're doing out a piece of paper one way, another way, turn it upside down. It's amazing. It usually ends up looking like something.
That's
So if
lovely.
that's not creativity, I don't know what is. But
No, it is.
I've got a little set you can carry around in my pocket. Uh, but honestly, I don't always do that. But I do have one. So if I'm stuck someplace, I can be creative. And of course, there are apps. If I've got a cell phone. Everybody has cell phones. There are online free apps that are just tangram apps, and they have shapes and that you can make. So really fun.
Lovely.
Here's a guy smiling.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
here's a, it's really neat. Yeah, cool.
So
All with the same
a
shapes.
question here, Will, if I may.
Go ahead.
Are these creations made by you, or
Sure.
like did you come up with all these images and or they were
I
already
bought
there?
this set. Yeah, I bought this wooden set. I think I got it at Barnes and Noble years ago. And
Okay.
I'm sure they have one that people can get. And they're of course available online. And these shapes here, these aren't shapes that I created. I just looked in the book
Okay, so
and
the
found
book
some.
already had these options and
Oh,
possibilities given
oh
there.
yeah,
Okay.
they're just hundreds, thousands. I've got one book that's probably got 2,000 shapes in it. Just one book, And
Wow.
it's
Wow.
it-
That's lovely.
what's interesting about this shape is that it looks like a square, except that there's a corner chopped off, and the corner that's chopped off is a triangle, which is the right shape, but you can see it's a little bit too small.
Yeah,
Okay,
it would not make a
so you
square.
can take these 7 pieces and make, Yeah, it doesn't fit. It's not big enough. But here, so there are interesting sort of paradoxical shapes that
Yes.
this is one of them where you look up, say, well, how to make that. And of course, when you see these as puzzles in a book, they of course don't have the lines in there, so you can't see how to do it. All you would see would be a black kind of square shape with the corner cut off, and then a black triangle here. And you've got to figure out what pieces go where to make it work. So when you see the book, you just see shapes. Pete so much cute. Okay. This is a much more recent invention. Pete Hine was they call him a polymath, so a person who was good at many different things. And way back, I believe it was in 1933, of all things, while listening, as the legend goes, to a lecture on quantum mechanics by Heisenberg, of all people. He had the idea of taking a cube, okay, it's 3 by 3 by 3, which is what this one is, you can see. It's got 3 by 3 by 3, and taking them, breaking them apart. And if it's a 3 by 3 by cube, it's got 27 little cubes in there. And by gluing them together in certain ways, and this is the way of doing it, you've got a flat T shape, a little angled piece, kind of a zigzag piece, an L, and then you got kind of a corner piece, a little piece with a twist going this way, a little piece going a twist that way. By gluing those 27 pieces together in this way, this sort of becomes the equivalent of a three-dimensional tangram that you can put them together, of course, to form a cube. And of all things, there are exactly 240 different ways of doing this. So, you can spend a lot of time just trying to make a cube, but you can make other interesting shapes, like this crystal it's called, which is pretty cool. You see it's these steps here. This shape is actually called a crystal. Here's a piece that's called a zigzag wall. Okay. Here's a piece that's called a Gordian knot. And I think you can see what's going on here. You've got sort of a cube. And then instead of these four pieces here, finishing off the cube, they're down here. There's one, two, there's one kind of sticking out there, and then there's one kind of sticking out on the back side. So complicated looking shapes. Here's one that's called a castle. It's kind of neat. It's flat. There are three pieces that are not flat. There are three pieces that stick up in all three directions, and those go here, and then you have to fill in the rest of these. So this puzzle, the one you're looking at, is actually one of the original puzzles that became made out of rosewood. It's really beautiful puzzle, and this is one that became available on the market in 1960. He thought of this dissection back in the 30s, but it wasn't until about 30 years later when he started to produce this thing commercially.
Oh.
And the first thing he did is he contacted a Danish, he's Danish, he contacted a Danish firm to make these beautiful rosewood sets. And then Parker Brothers picked up a license for that, and they made plastic sets, which were available. And I have a red one, a blue one, and there's actually an orange one that's quite rare to find. But it's the same puzzle. It's just that it's manufactured out of plastic. It's less expensive. But I spent many hours playing with this as a kid. I remember when this puzzle, I was alive already when this puzzle came out on the market, and it was a big hit at the time. Okay.
Wonderful.
So these are two that are very creative. You can again you can take these pieces here and you can reproduce something that's in a puzzle book, or you can just play with them and put them together and see what sort of three-dimensional shape you can make. And I think everything I make tends to look like some kind of architecture, some sort of building or something, but it's pretty cool.
It is.
There are some puzzles that you solve, and there's a little twist at the end of it. If you see something that's surprising, unbelievable, maybe even confusing. And so I thought actually four examples of that. I have a happy cat box, a trefoil knot, a Dewdney dissection. It's called in on a classic T. And so the first one is here I've got a a wooden box here that comes apart. And I actually have this. If we have time when we're through, Katie thought it'd be nice if I actually showed you how this works in real time, not just looking at pictures. But here's a cat here that's sleeping peacefully. And the question is, why is this cat sleeping so peacefully? Well, let's take a look. So you can start pulling some pieces out here and here. And you take the rest of it apart. And of course, what do you see? There's a little mouse inside there. So that's why the cat is so happy. He just had a nice dinner of a mouse. Not so good for the mouse. Why the cat is happy. So it's fun. So that's the surprising part. You take the puzzle box apart and there's a little surprise inside. Okay, here's a puzzle that I made myself out of mahogany. And if you know what a trefoil knot is, it's like an overhand knot. If you follow one of the legs here, it sort of twists around, and then comes back to the beginning. So it's like a 3-looped knot. And you see that in embroidery, people making patterns and things. And if you take this apart, it comes apart in 3 absolutely identical pieces. It sort of, to me, looks like a mini Stonehenge. But you can take these pieces and you can put them together, and it makes this nice knot. So you can actually put these things together in different ways, and so it's sort of a creativity thing. But I thought it's a neat idea that you can take this knot apart and put these 3 pieces. Okay. So Dewdney's dissection. Okay, there's a guy named Dewdney, Henry Ernst Dewdney. And at the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s, there were 2 great puzzle makers in the world. Okay, England had a tremendous puzzle maker, Henry Ernst Dewdney, and he designed hundreds and hundreds of puzzles. This was the golden age of puzzle making, and you can still get his books online. And he had word problems and numerical problems and all kinds of interesting geometric problems. He considered this puzzle to be his greatest creation. And what you've got here are, I actually made this one myself, and these pieces are quite large. They're about, altogether, they're about 18 inches on the side. And the idea is you have these 4 pieces that don't look anything special, and nevertheless, you can put them together to form a perfect square, okay, which is kind of neat because these certainly don't really look like they do anything special, but you can make them into a perfect square.
Oh, wow.
And then with the very same pieces, you can rearrange them to form an absolutely perfect equilateral triangle.
What?
Same
How is
pieces.
that possible?
So this,
Wow.
it's amazing. It's truly amazing. And I'll emphasize, this is actually mathematically perfect. If you do these with a ruler and everything, measure everything out on paper, it isn't just close to be triangle. It is actually perfectly equalateral. And I tried to make it look pretty good by being careful with my saw cuts. But you can go from here. It's amazing. And I've always wanted to look for an opportunity, like at a puzzle party or something, where I give somebody these pieces and I just say, what do you make of these? What can you make out of these? And I'd like to know how many people would come up with a square, okay?
Right.
And how many come up with a triangle? I think fewer. Most people, since they see these square corners here and here and here, they sort of think it looks like that. So you get a square. I'd like to know how many people, once they find one of these shapes, keep trying and discover the other shape. And I figure that's got to be 1 in a million, because usually once you find a shape, you figure you're done. Well, there are actually 2 shapes in this one puzzle. So this is very surprising. Very cool. So he considered this to be his greatest creation. And I think it's conservatively so. There's another puzzle that people may have seen that's called the classic T. And this is something that anybody can make at home with a piece of cardboard, or I use a piece of wood here, a nice piece of maple, You just take a plank of maple and you cut it into these shapes. And the cuts have to be made rather precisely here. But you see, there's nothing terribly complicated about them. And the idea is that you can take these shapes, and the idea is to arrange them to form a letter T. And that's why it's
Oh,
called the classic T puzzle. This puzzle is immensely frustrating for people. In order to solve this, you have to overcome a huge psychological barrier.
oh,
And I had this at the Spurlock exhibit there, and I got endless fun watching people after people uh, solve this, sit down, and there are people that just would not give up on it. They said, "I'm not leaving until I get this thing figured out." And I never had to show anybody. Eventually, they did get it.
oh,
It's an amazing puzzle.
lovely,
And to say,
lovely.
tell somebody that you take these pieces, a perfect T. It's really something. Very cool puzzle.
It is. It is.
And this is one you can look up online if you. But it's this puzzle has one of the greatest psychological barriers of any puzzle that I know. You
Wow.
just mentally, when you're trying to put the pieces, you just don't see it. So it's very cool.
True, true.
So we've been creative, we've been surprising. Let's do some meditation here. And these puzzles are characterized by, I think, simple, almost repetitive motions, not exactly the same, but it's a very simple set of pieces. And I find these to be very common. So the first one is one called the hopping pawns. And this is actually one that I made myself as well. I took a piece of wood, drilled some nice holes in it, put some green felt at the bottom. And I actually have this one I can show if you want to see it. This doesn't, you don't really get the full effect of this by looking at pictures. You actually have to see how the pieces move. But the idea is you've got 3 pawns on one side, 3 dark colored pawns on the other side. And by moving a pawn forward 1 square at a time or 1 hole at a time, or hopping over another pawn, you're supposed to get these to exchange their position. So here they start. Okay, partway in, they look like this. And then finally, you're done and they've switched places. So it's as simple as this puzzle is. It's an amazingly calming thing to do. If I just want to take a break from something, I've got this thing sitting right next to me here. You just take a break, and it only takes less than a minute to do it. But the meditative aspect comes, I think, from focusing on the puzzle, which means you're not thinking about any other things that may disturbing you or be distracting you. It just gets your mind off of whatever you've been thinking of. And for just a moment or two, a minute, thinking about this puzzle. And then once you've got it figured out, you feel better. And then you can go back and look at what you've actually been working on, with a fresh mind. So that's one thing. Tower of Hanoi is another puzzle. This is another puzzle that historically, it actually was created in the latter half of the 1800s. The myth that sort of grew up that was created around this is that there's a temple in Asia someplace populated by monks. And that at the temple on the altar is something that looks like this, 3 diamond spikes. I don't know how you get diamonds to look like spikes, but that's the story. And then on these spikes, on one of them, are 64 golden discs. Okay, each one a little bit smaller than the one underneath, so they form a pyramid. Okay, and the puzzle is 1 disc at a time. You move to another peg in such a way that at no time is a larger disc on top of a smaller one. Okay, so that's the constraint. And by shuffling these discs around, you try to transfer all the stack to one of the other 2 pegs. Okay, and you can actually calculate how many moves it takes. And this is a standard computer science problem. It takes, for 64 discs, it would take
Oh,
2 to the 64th power minus. And the story goes, the myth goes, is that when the monks finally are able to transfer all these discs to another peg, there's supposed to be a loud clap of thunder, and then the universe vanishes from creation. Okay. And
oh,
that sounds terrifying. But the
oh,
fact is the amount of time it takes you to move these is much, much greater than the estimated age of our own universe. So we have nothing to worry about. Everybody can
Oh
relax.
my
You
goodness.
don't have to worry.
That's interesting.
I've got 8. Yeah, that's great. I've got 8 discs here stacked up. And so the number of moves it would take to transfer these from here to here is 2 to the 8th minus 1. 2 to the 8th is 256 minus 1. It takes 255 moves to
Wow.
transfer this one of these others. So here's a picture of a partial transfer, and you keep going, and you keep doing here. I actually recorded myself. It takes 8 minutes to watch it, so I figured I wasn't gonna tire people with it, but it takes me 8 minutes. I have a video watching, of me transferring these. So
Oh,
it's kind of a fun hypnotic thing to do. So this is also more or less calming. You have to, at a very basic level, keep track of what you're doing. Otherwise, if you make a mistake, you end up going backwards and putting the discs back where you started. But the interesting thing about this is that as you start to go along, subconsciously, you realize what the pattern is. And I believe you subconsciously know that, what the pattern is, before you are consciously aware of it. So as you're going along, you're doing just fine. If you ever kind of shock yourself out of this sort of meditative state and sort of consciously start thinking about it, you lose track of where you are. You
oh,
almost have to do this whole thing at a low consciousness. So it's pretty cool.
wow.
Um,
Wow. Wow.
so that 3 different types of puzzles. I think that puzzles are a lot more than just distractions or way to spend a few spare minutes. Um, they definitely are engaging. They can be challenging as much as you want. They can be creative. You get a lot of satisfaction from solving them or even just working on them. Honestly, I've got a lot of puzzles. There are puzzles I've had for years that I still don't know how to do. And at some point, I hope to be able to figure them out. But it's fun having puzzles that aren't simple at some point and that are truly challenging. And you can add, it's not, some puzzles are often regarded as something you do yourself. It's a solitary adventure. It doesn't have to be. If you've got a couple of people together, friends of yours, you can be working different puzzles. And I get a lot of pleasure out of watching people solve puzzles. You get some insight into the way they think about things. So it's a lot of fun. So it definitely can be a social activity. Here's a picture of a cabinet, a curio cabinet in my home. You can see it's stacked with all kinds of puzzles. I've got wooden ones and Rubik's cubes, and then some other wooden ones in the back. I've got some nice Japanese puzzle boxes. So, I've got lots of things to keep me from doing what I should be doing. In the summer 2019, this was the exhibit at Spurlock, all the pieces. And so, thank you very much. That's information about me. Send me an email. I'd be very much interested in talking to you about puzzles of any sort. And I'll leave you with one final question. I'm interested if you have a favorite puzzle of something that you do every day, or if there's a puzzle you remember as a kid growing up that you really liked and that you just kept working it again and again and again. I'd be interested in that too. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Phil. This was so interesting. And I love how you segregated them into innovative and mathematical and then meditative and, never thought of puzzles that way. It was always about, having fun with puzzles. And as a facilitator or a educator, I thought it really helps develop your innovative mind or thinking out of the box. But there's so many facets to, puzzle making, puzzle solving. And I just wonder why we don't include that in our everyday activities, like.
So I hope everybody's excited. Yeah, I was going to say tomorrow's puzzle day, so everybody get excited and be sure to get a friend that you know to work some puzzle.
Yes, you bet. You bet. But thank you so much for the presentation. Abigail, you said you were solving those. Were those the pawns that were?
No, no.
Yeah,
It was the ones that you could create like a cat or
Oh,
and good.
yeah, we
Good.
played with those
Yeah,
in math.
All
Uh,
right.
yeah.
I don't know why, but we played with
Neat,
those
huh?
in math.
So they are there since that. When are we talking about? Like a couple of decades ago, Abigail, or maybe 15 years ago, that means?
So at least 30 years ago.
Okay, so that is that old, like the schools would use these puzzles
Mhm.
in there, which is so nice to hear, that thank you so much. I know Vyom has some puzzles to share, but we can come to you later, Vyom. Let's go to Abigail. Uh, Abigail Padfield Narayan, thank you so much for joining us today. She works at the uh, Spurlock Museum of World Cultures. Abigail happens to be a manager of academic programming at the museum, and she received her master's in early modern history, after which she started working at Museum de las Americas in Denver, Colorado. There, she worked as collection manager and
Yeah.
PR marketing coordinator and saw the value the museums had for inclusive, engaging education. She's currently completing her PhD in texts and technology with a focus in public history at the University of Central Florida. And I like this part. When she's not working, Abigail can be found baking treats for friends and families. Cakes are her favorite because they can be technically challenging, but cookies are easy to ship and share. And that's very practical view.
Yeah, so we don't like Gotham and I will not eat the things that I bake, which it's not a bad thing. It's just like I wanted something that is challenging and so I'll bake something and then like the cake will just sit there for a week and I'm like, I guess we're throwing it out because it is now getting moldy, but it was fun to make. Oops.
So that's a wonderful alternative, and that I think that is where we are also talking about puzzle solving, and you're actually, a challenge solving of you love baking, but what do you do? So you bake cookies.
Yeah.
Year for one of their Christmas presents is I baked gingerbread, okay? And instead of making a gingerbread man or a gingerbread house, I rolled out and cut out squares and I cut them into 10-gram pieces. So these
Hmm.
were puzzle
Oh,
cookies. So
wow.
I
How cool
put
is
them
that?
together and gave them. And then I said, you've got to get these pieces back together into a square before you can eat any of them. And so they thought that was a lot of fun. But I thought that was pretty neat to get these
That
gingerbread.
is,
So I
and
made
that's
the
very,
triangles and the squares and everything. And puzzle
very
cookies.
creative, very
Yeah.
creative. That's lovely. That's lovely. All right. So over to you, Abigail.
So I was looking at just like I did a search in our database for puzzles and like there's not like typical like even mind puzzles, right? Like you'd think we'd have tangrams or something and we don't. In our collection, we have some in our teaching collection. And so I kind of like the one thing that did come up and I'll see if I can share my screen. Um Ignore all of the stuff in the background. It's
It's
time
perfect.
to
Perfect. We can see,
it's
we can try.
it's class time, so I have to like make notes and remember when classes are. So one of the things that we do have like that is marked as puzzle in our collection is a commemorative puzzle for
Okay.
the 20th Summer Olympics in Munich, which is
Ah,
this square box. Um, and
lovely.
it is not put together correctly here in the picture. Because the sides, the colors are supposed to match on all of the boxes. And in like one side, you'll see like 1972 spelled out, and then there's like Munich, München. But I don't know why they didn't take a picture of it put together correctly.
Oh, okay. So are you saying that this particular piece that you have, it belongs to the, that old Olympics? Is it that
Yeah, so it's a commemorative puzzle for the 20th Summer Olympics in Munich. So in 1972 when they held the Summer
Wow,
Olympics in Munich, this was one of like the commemorative pieces for that.
that
Uh,
is so neat.
yeah, and we actually Spurlock has a lot of Olympic commemorative pieces for all sorts of countries, right? So we have a plaque, like a serving tray
Mhm.
for the Olympics that were held in Mexico. We have a bowl from Greece, like a glass bowl that is a commemorative thing for the Olympics held in Greece. Um, which is, like really interesting, right? Like why does the like a little place in Illinois have all of these
I know.
commemorative Olympic things, right? And like on display in our European gallery, we have Olympic torches, like the torches that were used in the passing of the Olympic flame.
Okay.
So we have a couple of those in our collection, and it's, kind of like this weird, like, why do we have this thing? And I do not know, but someone decided to donate these things to us.
That might be cool.
And I get to use them with my classes. I haven't used this commemorative puzzle yet. But kind of like thinking of what puzzles can do. So they're kind of like games, and they can be kind of strategic, and they have some sort of calming effect sometimes as well. We do have artifacts along those lines. So something like this is a case to an old ball from ancient Egypt. So this would be around this.
Oh,
And these are both from ancient Egypt. They were probably buried with someone, potentially they were just lost um, when someone was playing with them. Would they be playing things like baseball? I mean, because that's what this looks like, right? It looks like the outside of a baseball that we
oh,
see today, but
okay.
it's not. It is thousands of years old. Uh,
Wow.
and they wouldn't necessarily be playing something that we associate like baseball, and these are actually a lot smaller. These are still things like game, like puzzles that have been around for millennia. And so we kind of keep using these things. We have I'm probably gonna, yep, okay. So this is a marble from ancient Egypt.
Oh,
And so this would be used for the games and potentially kind of like puzzle type things, but this is a marble that would be used. Um,
so
and
I had few questions, because you're showing so interesting things. What do you think the material that it is made up of? Doesn't look like glass to me, though.
so there's a potential that it is clay. Let me just it's
Really?
glass. It's glass.
Oh, it is. Oh, wow. From
Glass.
Egypt.
Yep,
That is cool. Okay, that's interesting.
yep. It is glass.
Okay. And the one from the Munich Olympics, was that paper by
That's
any chance?
paper. Yep.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
It did look like one. All right, thanks.
Uh, yeah. Um, So then when we think about like strategy, you have chess and checkers. So we have an old chess piece, which is a very detailed, there's a ship, there's people, kind of piece. And then we have some chess, that's a checkers piece. And then we have some chess pieces, what a king looked like. This is around like the somewhere between the 12th, 13th, 14th century,
Oh, wow.
potentially Scandinavia. This is a reproduction, or UK. Um, and then kind of a bishop piece. I didn't have a big picture of this one. And then we have a queen and a pawn. And so we have like this chess set, right? Like, and these
Lovely.
are all things that, you know, for some people, I have a friend of mine where chess was a relaxing activity. Like this was something that he would do to relax, is play chess.
Oh,
Uh,
oh,
which it is weird, right? But there's that
it is.
strategy to it. There's there for him that was a calming effect, the way that Philip was talking about some of the puzzles that he does. Um, we also
Well, this is
have
my favorite chess.
we also have like
Method.
this ball and stick, right? And we have one in the teaching collection that I'll be using for a game studies and design class on Thursday. And we're trying to get the students to get this little bit here into the ball there. You can do it.
So
There's a chance you're gonna hit yourself in the head.
really? Okay.
Yeah, because like you have like it's like, do you know the game where there's like a cup and the ball that goes into the cup, and you kind of like bring the ball swings and you
I've
try to
got one
put
like
the ball in the cup. So this is
Oh,
something similar, but you need to get the ball on this little stick thing here.
oh,
Um,
oh, I see. I see.
my charter.
That's difficult.
yeah. Yep. So like it's kind of like puzzle like, right? Like you're trying to put something together, but
Absolutely.
it's a
Yes, it is.
different way of doing it.
Game puzzle, probably, like you're
Um,
playing.
and there's, like I've tried doing this. I, would hit my thumb and hit my hand, and as I try to get the ball into the stick. Um, and the final piece that I chose was kind of associated with a game that you would use your hands. So this is kind of like the badminton birdie.
Mm.
People don't call it a birdie here though. They call it a shot shuttlecock, which
Shuttlecock.
I've never heard that
Okay.
word before. I know it as a birdie with the badminton. Um, but for this game, you play it with your hands, and you kind of like whack this back and forth with your hands.
Okay.
We do have one in the teaching collection that I am pulling out for students again on Thursday, so we'll see how
Well,
crazy
lovely.
it goes.
All right.
uh,
Mhm.
uh, but we do have things like mahjong sets, and like that has become the way that you play it on something like a phone is more puzzle-like than the way that you would really play it sitting down with the four people.
Oh,
Because you're trying to make the matches on like your phone game.
yeah.
But so we
Well,
have in our teaching collection, we have like mahjong sets. We have a variety of different like games that are from all over the world. There is an ancient Egyptian game, Setnet, I think. Senet.
That's
Some
nice.
Yeah, yes.
Senate, the
Um,
gifting game called Senate.
yes. Um, and so like we do like our collection is varied, but it's almost also kind of lacking in some of the things that we associate with kind of like puzzles too.
Mm.
Um, for a world culture museum. But like we have our teaching collection is a great a thing that we use, and teachers will come and take stuff out as well. And some of these include, the shuttlecock and the mahjong and allowing students around the area to kind of like play with these toys and puzzles.
That's lovely. That's lovely. And I'm not sure where we put a line between these are games and these are puzzles,
Yeah.
because they are so interconnected in the sense that they both are entertaining, they both need your wits, they both need your skills, and they're designed in a very different way. So the designing itself is like, I think, a puzzle making. When you are creating a puzzle, you have to think more of how, so that way I think, Phil, hats off to you for actually working on designing those. So, but these were great collections. I had a question, Abigail, if we come to the museum sometime, do we get to, excuse me, use these and kind of try these hands-on, or you have something else that is
Yeah, so I mean we can set up a time for that, but they're not usually just out in the gallery because we do have to kind of like be careful with some of the stuff. So like I know today there is a games day going on. We are closed right now.
really?
Yeah, they had like a family game program today. Um, so one of my colleagues had, games out and up in the learning gal like the CCG. Um, but we don't really have anything like this out just like sitting out. Because we need to we do need to monitor it, like some of these things, marbles, we do have pickup sticks, we have like there are potentials for accidents to happen, and so we need to mitigate that as much as possible, so we don't really have our teaching collection out in the museum, but there's always the potential to do like um a program where we
Like
do,
right,
yeah,
custom build
like a
or
special
for a
program where we
visit.
do bring them out like they did today. So
But thank you so much for, all the sharing, all the good stuff. These was very unusual. I would have, we would have expected the typical things that we know about these cultures. Like even once I saw this, what was the game of what Kauravas and Pandavas would play. You have it in fabric, and so it's decorative, but it's a very common play. The Pachisi or something it's called. So
Partiti, partiti.
Pachis,
cheesy.
Pachis, something, with the
Yeah.
dyes. And so
Yep,
that's very ancient Indian.
partiti.
But
Yeah.
Spurlock has some fantastic collection with all
Mhm.
these, decorative ancient artifacts that were not just everyday use, but also something to do with your intellectual, usage at those times, at that period of time in history, actually. So this was very interesting. I would love to learn more about the Munich cube that you showed me, the memorandum, and maybe sometimes I can get started with some research around. It's so neat. It's like,
So
Yeah,
I
like
wanted to make, yeah,
it's one of those, oh, I want to say like in the late 90s, they were making cubes that like were small, and like you would fold them up and one picture would be, and then like you'd unfold it and then another picture, and like
right, yes.
that's what it reminds me of, is that the foldy cube from like the late 90s.
But it's very interesting artifacts that you got to us today. Very unusual, I would say, that I would have never imagined that Spurlock still has with them, something like that. So thanks again. And we'll go ahead with Vyom. We're going to talk about the bridge that you had built with your group and which was a part of a physics assignment. So it's impressive how you guys come up with, designing, but that uses your science fundamentals. So over to you. Please share with us your experiences about building the bridge. And what do you think about puzzles or even problem solving, puzzles as a problem solving tools? And thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Miss Kuldeep. As she was saying earlier, me and my group for a physics project earlier this school year, we had to create a toothpick bridge. And the point of the bridge was simply to have the best efficiency ratio. And that efficiency ratio is just the weight that the bridge can hold divided by the total weight of the bridge. So while it might seem like a simple project, there were a lot of things that actually went into creating this model. We had to use the physics concepts that we actually learned, the raw math that went into building it, and then all the art skills and soft skills that we needed to use to make sure that we got everything set in place correctly. We got all the angles right, everything was precisely done, and everything had to look good as well. There was also a point fee for that. So, what we actually learned from this is that you need to make use of multiple skills or talents. Either you having all those skills or different members of your group having multiple skills and coming together with teamwork to actually come out with a product that is going to be the best quality that it can. And I think this like concept can be used anywhere you go in life. Teamwork is used, by everybody. Um, if you don't excel at something, you pull in somebody else that is better than you at that, and you feel for their weaknesses. So that's something that I learned with this kind of, you could consider this project a puzzle almost,
Wow.
where, we had to build a model to achieve our task. If you don't mind me sharing my screen, I also have like Mr. Nyman was talking about. I also have tangrams that we've actually created and sent to people as cards almost. There we
Oh,
go. This card
yes.
with the 10 grams. So as you can see, I had all these pieces cut up. What I had originally done was actually arrange them in the shape of this fish and then decided to cut them however I felt like. And I sent this as part of a birthday card to somebody that I had made. I thought that this would be kind of just like a little fun addition to just reading a birthday card. They could have some more fun putting it
Yeah.
together, laminating it, maybe putting it up, and they would feel good about their efforts, and it would just give them, a little respite from whatever they were doing that day. Another, not puzzle exactly, but another card that I've made, and I've used a similar concept here actually, is this greeting card that you can see on screen. So a lot of art went into this, yes, but there are a couple of puzzle aspects in here. There's a Scrabble on the right with answers on the back, of course. And even on the card itself, if you look closer towards the right side, at the top here, there's actually a locking mechanism that I had built. And what this was kind of like a little mini puzzle, it functioned in holding the card together as it was sending, but it was also a little trick for whoever had to open the card. They had to
Mhm.
mess around with it for a couple of minutes trying to figure out how to actually open it so that they could read what was inside.
That's neat.
And here's just another picture of the same.
That, right. It's right there.
Yeah. And that kind of showed the
But
same things, that a puzzle could lighten somebody's mood or, divert their mind from whatever they were doing that day. And it's always a fun little addition to, get maybe like a little puzzle when you weren't expecting anything at all. And that's kind of my take on puzzles and how I've used them, experienced them, and worked with them in my personal life.
That is that is wonderful, Vyom. Your puzzles, and we wish we could have a picture of your bridge that you had built because I saw
I was gonna
all
ask.
of you putting a lot of efforts into that. So what they had to do, Phil, was build a bridge with toothpicks, and then they would
Mhm.
be judged with how much weight every group, the bridge from every group can carry, and accordingly they would be graded for that. So I think that was really challenging, and I saw them working on it, sticking that, and then remaking just to align the pieces so that they can hold. And that brings us to the engineering part of puzzle solving that, there has to be a certain kind of geometry to things that, so that, you can actually come up with the function that it has to play. So I see the application of puzzles not just as toys or entertainment or games, but also how that develops, the youth. What do you think about, involving puzzles in your schools or your activities that you have? Do you think involving such activities in your maybe weekly or monthly meetings, maybe just for 5 minutes of a break, instead of playing a ball game, do you think puzzle solving would be fun to include in?
Absolutely, absolutely. So as you were mentioning, in these whatever bi-weekly, monthly meetings that we hold, we always do try to do some kind of icebreaker, fun activity, whatever you want to call it. And some of the times we do have puzzles. While they're not directly like the hands-on, put something together, take something apart type of puzzle, it is always the find out what you need to do and then achieve it the best that you can type of puzzle solving. So you use a similar kind of thinking set and skills and skills that you would use to collaborate and get the job done in an efficient amount of time. And similar skills go into taking a puzzle apart. You have to be very careful in how you think about things so that you don't get it wrong and have to do more work down the road. And these similar kind of games are the games that we play at these clubs. And especially with the older members, they realize that they have to come up with a plan first before they can actually do anything. So yeah, I do think that these can be used very much at these kind of meetings to, even to get people up and run around the school for whatever it is.
Exactly.
And we are putting these into effect already as well.
And for your bridge, because I've seen this is something that engineering students do every year, and it'd be fun to see what pattern, what kind of a plan you came up with.
Absolutely,
Really
absolutely.
I'm
I'm kind of sad that we lost my pictures on that too.
When you're solving a problem, it's sort of solving a problem with a particular goal in mind, and then there's other ways of just exploring. You would have an idea, and you don't really have a specific end goal in mind. You're just literally exploring opportunities, possibilities. And so it's sort of like closed-ended thinking and open-ended thinking. And of course, both of these have their advantages. So, but it's very nice. I'm glad to see that you're really actively working on this kind of thing. It sounds like you have a great group.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much. Before we say bye, I had this when Abigail was talking about the cube that she said you put together. I don't know if you can see this.
These are wonderful.
But this is
I
something
know
that I cut and open up, and I thought the patterns and just it's so beautiful.
If you hold it, it's very, very nice. If you hold it open like that, hold it open so that it forms a loop. So that it's like that. You see how it works, how you've got these triangular pieces. You should be able to, you can assemble this into a cube, but you should be able to actually turn it inside out. The child should play with that.
Yes, most of us have something or the other that is puzzle or, like games like these that you can fiddle with. And then there are sensory perceptions that happen through these. So this is not just a plain cube, but it has a pattern and, and you're trying to hold it and see the shapes. And so some simple ones like these, but they're really nice. Today, thank you so much, Vyom. Your being part of our project when we started has been is a wonderful start. I would wishing you all the best for all your feats, and we'll see you in February again.